All right, good evening. It is Monday, May 11th, 2020 at 5 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Lansing City Council to order and ask that the clerk please call the roll.
Councilmember Spatafor.
Present.
Councilmember Hussein.
Here.
Councilmember Wood.
Here.
Councilmember Dunbar.
Here.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Present.
Councilmember Betts.
Present.
Councilmember Garza.
Here.
Eight members.
Thank you. A
present.
quorum is
Quorum of the
present.
committee.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Sherry. First thing, a little housekeeping. Recall, council members, we're going to use the raise hand function to get my attention, if you can, please. And then folks who are on the call who are wishing to present this evening, or part of the presentation rather, we're going to keep your videos off until it's your turn to present for now. So just council members and city staff that are pertinent to the discussions. Thank you. First things first are the minutes from May 4th, 2020. Vice President Hussein.
Sure, President Spatafor, I would move all 7 pages of the May 4th, 2020 meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. The minutes have been moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Hussein.
Yes.
Councilmember Betts.
Right here, kiddo.
Yes.
Councilmember Dunbar.
Yes.
Councilmember Garza.
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson.
Yes.
Councilmember Spatafor.
Yes.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Yes.
Councilmember Wood.
Yes.
Minutes carried 8-0.
Yes.
Thank you, Sherry. Before we move on to public comment, I will just note that under discussion/action, items B and C, we will not be taking action on tonight, but if you've already planned to make public comment on either of those, you're welcome to do so because they were on the posted agenda. They were just accidentally put on the agenda for tonight at Cow and Council. That was my mistake. I overlooked them on the overview. All right, so public comment for this evening. As usual, you will have 3 minutes for public comment. To speak during public comment, we ask you to raise your hand virtually. To do that on a Mac, it's Option Y. To do that on a PC, it is Alt Y. If you're participating on your phone, it is *9. And if you are using a tablet, you have to get to the raise hand button by selecting the participants window. So I will give you 30 seconds starting now to register that you wish to speak for public comment. Ten seconds. Oh, very good. So we have one person so far. Sir, you are unmuted. If you wish to start your video, you may. If you just wish to do audio, go for it. It is Michael McColeman. You have 3 minutes starting now.
Michael McColeman. I own Spare Time Entertainment. I find it difficult in light of our high unemployment, in light of number of businesses that are closed with no idea if and when they're going to open, that we're having a discussion regarding a drain project that's been in the works since 1913, and there is no budget. I really think the project, this meeting, this discussion should be tabled until there's live public comment on it. And this is the first time in history that I can remember that we had the supply side of our economy as well as the demand side of our economy shut down totally. We don't know how we're going to come out of this. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. McCollum. Are you all set?
I am, thank you.
Thank you for your time and joining us. All right, I do not see any other public comments, so we will move on to our presentations. Council, we have several presentations this evening, starting with the Montgomery Drain Assessment presentation with several folks, including the Drain Commissioner, and we're going to hear from our budget folks on this first, our bond council, our public service department, and then finally the Drain Commissioner. So it's my understanding that Jake and Shelby are on the phone, or one or the other of them. If you are here, speak now. Councilmember Wood, you have a question? Yes, ma'am.
How would you like us to direct questions on this? Do you want us to wait until the entire presentation when each group is done? How would you like us to deal with that?
Thank you for that very important question. I think if we can do it by groups of people, so let's tackle this budget, bonding, Kilpatrick's piece, and then the Drain Commissioner himself. Does that work for everybody? Just a nod of the head will be good, or a heck no if you wanna. All right, that works. All right, we'll get started then. Shelby, I see you, so you're on the hot seat. Do you need screen share capabilities?
Nope. Good evening, everyone. I'm actually gonna just introduce here our bond counsel and municipal advisor. We've got Jim Kiefer and Jared Smith from Dykema, as well as Brian Leffler from Baird to talk about specifically the numbers and what made it into the budget. And then I'll have Jake point out where you can find it in the budget in case folks want to read it directly. So Jim Kiefer, I see he's on here. I don't see his face yet, but.
Jim, I'll ask you to start your video. There we go.
Jim Kiefer.
There you are, Jim.
Let's see. I'll cover the financing part of the project. Brian Leffler from Baird is also on, municipal advisor to the city. And I think Andy Kilpatrick is also going to discuss part of the project. With respect to the financing, this project has been ongoing for a while. The city petitioned for it in 2014. In 2018, the Drain Board allocated the cost of the project among the city of Lansing, East Lansing, MDOT, the Am County Road Commission. The allocations to the city were 64%. So 64% of the cost of the project has been allocated to the city. As the Drain Commissioner will discuss later this evening, the project is estimated to cost about $34 million, $34.8 million, $34.9 million are the latest estimates. Bids are being received. You can discuss the timing for those bids. But if that estimate holds true, then the city's share is about $22.3 million. The Drainage District is going to issue bonds for the cost of the project, 30-year bonds. And then the city will need to pay its share of the debt service on those bonds, its share being 64% of the debt service over the next 30 years. And the exact dollar amount that will be dependent on the final structure of the bond issue and also on the interest rates that are received once the bids are sold in July or August. The city then has to determine how it will raise funds to pay back the annual cost. Again, in today's interest market, it would be approximately $1,130,000. So somewhere between $1,100,000 and $1,200,000. Historically, the city has oftentimes paid drain assessments for much smaller drain projects out of its general fund. The city's never had a drain assessment of this magnitude before. So the proposal in the budget that's been submitted is to have 1/2 of that cost on an annual basis paid by special assessments on the benefited properties, and 1/2 of the cost on an annual basis paid with a citywide tax on all real property in the city under the drain code. So under section 475 of the drain code, you can impose a property tax citywide. So that's the proposal that's in the budget. As Shelby said, Jake can walk you through the different aspects of the budget that it's in. There's also been a lot of discussion about the cost of the project for certain supplemental benefits that are not part of the main drain part. Again, the drain commissioner can address these, but for the city, there's some supplemental benefit that's been requested for the Frandora Hills area with respect to CSO aspects of the project. And then there's also supplemental benefits that have been requested with respect to the Red Cedar Development Project. 100% of the Red Cedar Development Project supplemental costs would be assessed and paid by the owners of that property, by the developers, and would not be part of the cost of the main part of the project that we've discussed previously. So the cost of the Red Cedar developments are not included in the $34.8 million overall project, or in the estimated cost of 22.3 to the city. I'm happy to discuss other questions with respect to the financing part of this. I know Andy wants to talk a little bit about the history of the project and the overall scope of the project.
Okay, let's pause for questions for Mr. Kiefer, Mr. Leffler. I want to just pre-call on Councilmember Wood. I know you've got a question, Councilmember Wood.
Yes, thank you very much. In looking at the cost, you said half of it would be for special assessment for the properties that receive an advantage from the Montgomery drain, and then half for all property tax payers. Do you have an idea of what that figure would be? Splitting those two, what that's going to look like?
Well, I would have an estimate on the overall aggregate amount. But are you asking about on a per parcel basis?
No, I'm asking.
Yeah, is it
how much of the one? Go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead, Councilmember Wood. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Something. So what I'm looking at is of the 1.2.
Go ahead, Councilmember Wood.
What you're saying is half of that. That's okay. Half of that would be 500,000 or 500.1, thousand that would be under the special assessment, and then are you saying then 500,000 would be the property tax across all property taxes? Is that what you're saying per year?
Yes. So if the final amount was an assessment to the city of $1,120,000, then 560,000 would be split both ways. I should say Brian Leffler from Baird is the finance person, and he might be able to address those numbers also.
And
Brian, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Sure. If the 565,000 was assessed across the entire tax roll of the city, and using last year's or the 2019 taxable value, the drain code tax rate would be approximately 0.26 mils. We are waiting for the final equalization report for Eaton County, properties in Eaton County, to determine what the tax rate would be for 2020 taxable values. I'm assuming based on the growth in Ingham County, it's going to be something less than 0.26.
And on an average of $100,000 parcel of property, what would that equate to?
$26 per year. If it's her taxable value. If the home value is 100, it would be half of that.
Okay, so the properties that are residential that are in the drain area, they're going to be paying a special assessment plus the property tax, the 0.26 mils. Is that the understanding of that?
That's correct. Versus paying 100% of the assessment.
All right, thank you.
Looks like Councilmember Spitzley's trying to get my attention too. No, you're all set? Okay,
Nope, Carol, they answered my question. Thank you.
thank you. Are there other questions before we move on? All right, let's move on. I think, Mr. Kiefer, are you all set?
I'm all set. And I think perhaps Andy is next.
Yes. Mr. Kilpatrick, are you here? There you are.
I am here.
All right, go for it.
Okay, I guess it's the pleasure of the council if they want me to put up on, share on the screen the information I set around or not. Essentially, it's a map and some bullet points. So whatever our council president Spatafor.
Yeah, are you able to do that or do you want me to do it here?
Well, we can see. I have stuff I haven't shared it before, so I'll try and do that. If I you'd have to enable it for me, or you can share the map if you want to.
Yeah, I'll
first.
just share the map for you. How's that sound?
All right, that sounds good.
Sorry, folks, just a second.
All right, so as everyone can see on this now, this shows the boundaries of the Montgomery drain, and in green is what is within the city of Lansing. The brown being East Lansing, the blue being MDOT jurisdiction, and the red is Lansing Township, and then the yellow within that red, those are the public right-of-way that is under the jurisdiction of the Ingham County Road Department. So this shows how the project would be assessed. If you see within the green, there's some hatched areas, some shaded areas. So if you look at Rainey Park, and then within Michigan Avenue, you can see some area there, as well as the south part of Red Cedar. And those are areas that are used for the drain project for rain gardens, water storage. So they're not generating storm runoff, and therefore they would not be assessed. But obviously the bulk of this area is City of Lansing, and that is why the percentage of this project would go towards the city of the 64%, because the bulk of this project area is within the City of Lansing. And obviously the impervious surface, if you look at all the commercial area, you can see there's not a whole lot of green there. So that is what's generating the majority of the stormwater. And at the north end, that's the Frandora Hills area that we're talking about, the neighborhood there that we are looking to do additional improvements, because when the storm sewers are being done, the sanitary sewers are the same vintage, and then obviously the roads as well. So we're taking advantage of this project to address the sanitary sewer conditions, improve those, as well as address the roads, so that entire Frandora Hills area will be addressed while this project is going on. And that's it as far as the area goes. Council President Spatafor, if you want to share kind of the other document that just is bullet points that goes over some history, and then this may actually address some questions that talked about the average cost. If we, and this would be at 100%, I did this at 100%. So if it's at 50%, it would be half of that. But just a little bit of history on storm sewer maintenance. that is funded by the general fund. So we do have numerous accounts in our general fund for storm sewer. They are termed storm sewer maintenance, obviously, and there is a line that was added in 2014 to fund these various drain assessments. Started out as $150,000 the first year it was put in there, and then as projects were added and costs increased, we increased that to $200,000 in 2015, and then in 2020 we increased that to $400,000 as well. In 2019 we paid about $375,000 in drain assessments, and of the 20 that are assessed for Ingham County that year, Groesbeck being the highest, the average assessment is like 12,600. So you can see that the numbers we're talking about for Montgomery drain are, you know, many orders of magnitude or several orders higher than what our average that we're talking about in the drains that we're paying right now, which is why those we have just paid from the general fund and had not assessed those. I think has already been discussed the time frame for Montgomery drain. I mean, the drain was established back in 1906. At that point in time, what we call, I mean, Frandor area right now was field, so that was not developed at all. It was extended in 1954 and again in 78 by petition. And we already talked about the service area, so it's basically Lansing, East Lansing, and Lansing Township. You know, we're here at project bidding, so as far as actual costs, we're estimating that at $35 million. We don't know exactly what the cost will be because that's a competitive bid process. So we're talking $35 million. And as we already discussed, the apportionment, City of Lansing getting the largest at 64%, and then Lansing Township, MDOT, City of East Lansing, and Ingham County Road Department. Information that I got, kind of, we'll call it a dummy roll. So basically, if Ingham County Drain were to assess this, we got information of how they would do that, and it's basically based on the impervious percentage on each parcel, and you come up with equivalent acres are contributing there, and then you just divide that out. So with the developed land, and commercial land is basically 90% impervious. The residential area where you have, you know, grass and lawns and everything, that's kind of looked at as 30% impervious. So the information that is in the table below, that was based on a cost of 1.37 million per year for 30 years. That was probably when interest rates were a little higher. We're talking about a little lower. We're thinking that would be. But of the parcels there, so 3 of those we have are parkland, so those are not assessed. Those are 0% on there. But then we have 125 residential parcels, 55 commercial parcels, and you can see of those, if we just take the percentage times the acres and a little bit of credit for those that actually have some stormwater features on site, you come up with about $1,000 would be the minimum. This is not annual, this is total over the project. For a residential parcel up to a maximum of about 13,000. And so then average is around 6,000, and the average annual amount, and this is at 100%, is $377 per year. Again, that's at 1.37 million per year. So if we're talking 1.1 million, that goes down a little bit. And then if we're talking 50%, it's even less. Obviously on the commercial side, those being a higher percentage impervious, those costs are higher. So we're almost $10,000 is the minimum cost for a parcel up to 2.75 million. That 2.75 million, that's the Red Cedar parcel. So that skews things a little bit, but the average there is close to 200,000, and the average annual is close to 12,000. That's at 100%. And then obviously half of that would be just a little less than 6,000 per year. This is just for the construction. So at year 5 or after year 5, then maintenance is assessed. So maintenance is kind of rolled into the construction cost, but then you would have a small portion of the cost of the construction that would be for maintenance every year, much less than that, but those costs are not determined until I can see what those actual maintenance costs are. So that's kind of my brief summary Obviously, for those that were around in 2014, they remember that the city petitioned for the project, and then Ingham County also did. And at that point in time, it's kind of turned over to the drain commissioner, and it becomes a project that the drain office runs and the Montgomery Drain Board. So that's it as far as my information. I will be willing to answer any questions people might have.
I'm sorry, my mic was muted. Councilmember Spitzley. Supposed to be the expert at this, right?
Right. Thank you, President Spatafor. Andy, you mentioned construction costs. So are the construction costs going to be assessed just for the Frandor area or across city?
So for the construction costs, we're talking about outside the drain. So the work in Frandora Hills, the sanitary sewer work would be paid for by the sanitary sewer fund, just like we pay for, CSO and all sorts of other sewer projects. And then any road work would be paid for with Act 51 funding. So those costs would not be assessed as a special, at least at the moment, there's not an intention to do that. It could be assessed. There's, the possibility always to anything that's public benefit, but it has not been city policy in the past to assess other than when we put, roads or curb and gutter in. At that point in time, those are assessed, but the city has not had a history of assessing for the maintenance of those improvements.
Thank you very much. One more question, Mr. President. I had sent an email to Finance last week to ask them what those costs were. Do you have a number on how much those CSO costs are?
Well, so the sanitary and road work in the Frandora Hills, I'd have to pull out my numbers. I can get those to you. I think it was around $1 million, and I cannot remember if that was the sanitary only or the sanitary and road combined. But I believe it was combined up in that area. So it's not necessarily, with CSO, that's the separation. This area is already separated. So when it was constructed,
Okay.
It was separated in Frandora Hills. But so the storm pipe and the sanitary pipe are about the same vintage, have the same issues. So while we're in there, a lot of times kind of in the same trench, the plan is to do all that work at the same time.
Thank you, appreciate it. Peter, are you on mute?
Councilmember Wood, you're all set.
Thank you. I think this is more a question for legal than anything else. I know we went through the Bolt decision with a difference between the rain fee and the rain tax. And so I just want to make sure that this has been vetted through the city attorney's office. I know he was there when we went through some of this, and I want to make sure that we're not going down a line that we would have problems with. That's my first question. My second question has to do with the collection of this. If this is the intent to start collecting the revenue on this as of July 1st, so it would be on the winter taxes, or is it after the project has been completed? So if I could get answers to those two questions.
Mr. Smirka, go ahead if you want to unmute yourself. There you go. Nope, let me get you. All right, Jim, you're unmuted now. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have vetted this issue under the Bolt decision, and which has been litigated after Bolt, as a matter of fact, and modified and explained. And we've had these discussions with Dykema, and it appears to us that, again, we're dealing with special assessment benefiting properties, and that we believe it satisfies Bolt. So, Mr. Kiefer or the other Dykema people, you want to jump in on this?
Sure. This is Jim Kiefer. I'll follow up on that. Thank you. So clearly, the half that's being specially assessed on the benefited properties, very traditional, done many times in many of the counties across the state. So that's a very traditional way of spreading the cost. The tax on all property within the city is not done as frequently, but it is authorized under Section 475 of the Drain Code. Under the Headley analysis, any tax which was authorized pre-Headley does not require a vote of the electors. So since the Section 475 of the Drain Code has been in place since 1956, the opinion that we provided to the city is that you do not need to have a vote of the electors to go forward with a tax under that provision of the Drain Code.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes, in both, we didn't have the benefit of the Drain Code and the pre-Headley and that explanation by Mr. Kiefer, that there's a big difference here.
My question would be, do the citizens still have the right to petition to have this brought to the ballot?
Well, in the special assessment provisions.
Not the special assessment. I understand the special assessment. I'm talking about the other portion, which would be on all property taxes.
Someone would have to bring an initiative petition to put it on the ballot.
Okay. Right. And then my final question has to do again with when is this presumed to be to start the collecting the fees on this?
So the plan in the budget would be for the tax and special assessments to be in place in December of this year.
December. Okay, and if there were a lawsuit or anything that came from other municipalities about the assessment, you know, we watched that with the Drain Commission before, we would continue to collect the tax from this and hold it. Is that what we're looking at?
That would have to be a decision at that time unless there was an order or injunction of the court.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Councilmember Wood? Looks like it, yes, okay. Are there other questions before we move on to the Drain Commissioner? Councilmember Spitzley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for the mayor. Are we going to be doing any type of outreach or notification to the residents in advance of this coming up on their winter taxes? I mean, how are we going to roll it out?
We certainly can. Before telling anything, we needed to see what council was going to support. We had promised that we would give you a proposal, but we didn't know exactly what council would do with that. So we are providing to you first. Again, the Drain Commissioner, I believe, is going to talk about some of his public input, but we can certainly provide this information to the residents. You know, right now, I would say in writing, we can't have town halls really, it's difficult, but we will we'll certainly navigate getting them information as soon as we know what passes council.
And I see Councilmember Wood has a question, but Councilmember Wood, if you don't mind, I have a question.
Yeah, but
Go right
I
ahead.
appreciate
Councilmember
that.
Spitzley's done.
I appreciate that, and thank you. I think that some sort of notification I think would be helpful. I know that the Drain Commissioner is going to do kind of an outreach in that, and that's great. And I understand, you know, about the special assessments and all of that, but as you know, for the city of Lansing, I think if we have some outreach from us, their legislative body, I think would be good. Thank you.
Do we have an, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I don't know if you're the right person to ask this question, but do we have an idea of what the special assessment to the benefited properties might look like. We got the 0.26 mils, but not the special assessment. Does anyone have a document that shares that information?
I punt to our financial people, whether it's Dykema or Baird or Shelby. They would know best.
You know what? Never mind. You presented that spreadsheet. It was the 125 parcels and 55 parcels. I apologize. I was trying to run the meeting here. Okay, it's right there. Thank you. I'll move on. Councilmember Wood.
A couple of quick things. One, I think we had asked at a different meeting to get a spreadsheet showing the affected parcels and what those could possibly look like, and I don't believe we've gotten that. So if somebody has that, I know those were some discussions that we had earlier on. The second thing is this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that this is part of the budget that we'll be voting on the 18th. So we might have informational meetings out there, but council will have made their decision on this on next Monday. Am I correct with this?
Councilmember Wood, that is correct. I don't know who is going to answer that question, but we are, I think, part of the budget decision. Now, the other thing we can do is we can amend that decision, much like we probably plan to amend the budget with new information from, revenues and things like that. But just, yes, the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
Unless Shelby wants to add anything to that. I apologize, folks. The meeting seems to be running very slow tonight, audio and video. Go ahead, Shelby. Sorry.
I was just going to add, that's exactly right. If you wanted Jake to walk you through where it's at in the budget, I know he's on deck to do that. There is a line item that you'll see as part of the budget, as well as language that supports this particular tax in the resolution section as well. So if you haven't been able to find it, Jake can certainly point it out to you. If not, I know, I think Pat's on to also talk about. Let me see if he's available.
Yep.
Does anyone need Jake to point out where it's at, or have you been able to find it?
Just for the sake of people playing along at home, why don't you point us out, please? Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the line items go, that would be towards the back of the general fund revenues. You'll see, if I'm looking at the right document, total other revenues, Montgomery Drainage District. And so that's in the 101-680 line. It doesn't have a formal object code yet. In the general fund budget, you'll notice that it's in the other revenues as far as the resolution document goes, and in the net transfers for expenditure. And it should have a net zero impact on our budget. It would just flow through the revenues and go out the other end for the drainage district.
I will just add, I think it kind of came up, but just so we're really clear, obviously the general fund can't support this, or the recommendation from the administration wouldn't be to have this particular assessment or drain project rather hit the general fund. And so the process of giving it to an assessment or split across the drain tax is presented in the budget. However, the alternative of not doing this or having it be all or nothing, certainly we wouldn't want this to impact our general fund, especially now. So just wanted to make sure we're clear on that too.
Thank you. And I see Councilmember Hussein has his hand up, but there he is. Vice President Hussein.
Just very quickly, all of our home situations are drastically different. I had a technician at my door, the dog barking, and my daughter was finishing up her trombone lesson. So I'm not certain that I want to make sure I have my notes correct. In terms of Mr. Kilpatrick, did I hear correctly when we're talking about the supplemental benefits for Endora Hills in terms of the CSO work, that will be paid, the CSO will be paid through the the sewer fund. The road work will be paid for through Public Act $51, and that will not be part of the citywide 0.26 assessment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. I do not see any more hands up for this team, so I'm going to pivot over to our drain commissioner, and thank you all, Mr. Kiefer, Mr. Leffler, Mr. Fryer, Mr. Brower. Thank you for your time. Mr. Lindeman, are you still with us?
I am here.
There you are, and I will have you turn your video on if you wish. If not, we'll just hear your voice.
Well, my video is coming on, so.
All right. And Mr. Lindeman, we have one more agenda item that I imagine is going to take up some time as well. So we've got about 20 minutes left on this topic. Just, I'm not suggesting you should take 20 minutes, but I'm encouraging you to take no more than 20 minutes.
Well, I, like the rest of you, am an elected official, and given a bully pulpit, we tend to talk a long time. So I'll try to keep it short.
Thank you. Please proceed. And if you need to, are you sharing any presentations, or are you just audio and video?
No, I don't have any presentations. You should have received it in the mail, the final order by the Drainage Board, and you should have also received a analysis of some of the avenues we pursued, alternatives to accomplishing this project. We noticed, get a little bit of history, back in 1995, we noticed that this drain was starting to fall apart back in 1995, and it usually, once it starts to deteriorate, it tends to go pretty fast. The water collected in this watershed is about 80 to 85% impervious is the watershed, and it tends to be loaded with all kinds of chemicals and kinds of debris and pollution of all kinds. We have studied it for roughly 3 different years, all 3 of the main seasons within the year. Winter, spring, and fall typically are the same, and summer rainfalls. And collectively, over that 3-year period, we have determined that 50 to 75,000 pounds of pollution enter the river from this one watershed alone, which drove the basic design criteria for the project that we're going to create. We looked at all kinds of alternatives, including putting in a mini wastewater treatment plant. We looked at having everything underground, and as it turns out, that out of all the alternatives, putting in the kind of oxygen necessary to digest some of the biosolids and so on within the system, to just mention one type of pollution, which there are hundreds of, we figured that daylighting the pipes and having waterfalls and that kind of thing was the cheapest and least expensive form of activity we could create to try to address the pollution solution. We have backup material if anybody's interested in it. That's numbers. We have cases of numbers and data that show our outcomes for this project. So the scope of the project we believe is sound, and the scope of the project would include using primarily city-owned park property. And if you recall, over the last 8 years, we've been negotiating with the Parks Department and the City Council on what that should actually look like when it's all done. So the stormwater facility that we're going to put on the parks is going to be completely user-friendly, and it is going to be more of an attraction than a detraction. There's a roughly 2.5 miles of hiking biking paths that will be put around the stormwater facility. That can be used by bicyclers, hikers, joggers, walkers, whatever. The paths that are going to be put in on the red cedar portion of this, on the southern portion of the facility, is the paths are all being paid for by the developer, for example. The paths around Rainey Park are being paid for by the drain. And all of the aspects of everything we're putting in goes into this total drain cost of what we estimated it to be somewhere around 34 million. Now, we're pretty pleased with some of the bidding that's been taking place. So including this whole project, everything coming in terms of the projected 34 million, we've got a couple bids that are less than what we anticipated and one that was a little bit more, but we are constantly refining our scope to define avenues of savings and so on within the project. So it could be a little under 34 million, it could be a little over. We don't know yet for sure in terms of the price. We've divided it into 13 different divisions to be bid. We only have 3 of the divisions in right now. We're anticipating in the next 3 weeks to have the bulk of the other divisions all bid, and we'll have some firm numbers on those. We are getting a good a section of construction crews that will work on this. The construction firms that are bidding on it are very professional, and they tend all to be local. So they're within a 7-county area around Ingham County, which is our office policy that we take bids from around that area. So some of them live in Lansing, some of them live in Eaton County, some of them live in southern Ingham County, and some of them in Okemos, and so on and so forth. But so it's primarily local labor that will be working on this project through the construction phase of our development. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Talk about the drain code a little bit. The drain code is a unique document to Michigan. It's unfamiliar to most people, and it sounds kind of strange. Who would have a law running, regulating drains, but storm drains in particular. But Michigan was pretty much a swamp, and when we became a state, one of the top 40 laws they passed was Public Act 40, and it was the drain code. It put in charge of managing the drainage for particularly the lower half of Michigan, because from Clare south, we were pretty much all swampland, and upper northern Ohio in Indiana was pretty wet. So anyway, the operation of this law puts in charge a elected official with the ability to fix problems as they arise and so on. The bulk of our drains, just so that everybody knows, the bulk of the drains that exist in the city of Lansing and that exist throughout the county were put in between the Civil War. We have some documents of the drains being put in the 1850s, but most of them were put in around the end of the Civil War to roughly about 1930. And the life of a concrete pipe is estimated to be between 60 and 80 years. So you can do your math and figure out that most of these drains are reaching the end of their life, and they're going to have to be either lined or replaced and so on. And the Montgomery drain is not any different than any other drain. It's old. It has numerous, we have hundreds of pictures of broken pipe that we can show you, and some of them are in that report that you received. If we don't fix it now, it'll be more expensive to fix it later. I've heard a lot of people put this on hold, urging me to put it on hold and so on. But when we do the math, there's no better time right now with low interest rates and to move ahead with this project. We know that the Frandor Hill neighborhood is looking at some serious problems with its piping, as your public service department has noted. And when we have the roads open, it's just easier for us to replace 2 pipes as it is to close the road back up and then have somebody redig it and put the new sewer pipes in. So anytime we can partner on projects like this, it's a good thing. It's positive. It's cost effective, and it saves money in the long run, and so on. The hard part about infrastructure is somebody has to pay for it, and I think that's the biggest argument that everybody has to face. But does that mean that we shouldn't fix our infrastructure? No, I think we should move forward and fix our infrastructure, just as this is part of a bad bridge or potholes in roads or whatever. Eventually, we're going to have to fix all this stuff and replace it. The new material that we're using today, a lot of the plastic piping that we're using and so on has a life 10 times longer than the concrete pipes. And we think that we're going to get great efficiency out of this in the future. So for future generations to come, this project will set a standard, in my opinion, for infrastructure that's going to last a long time. I don't like building anything I can't see past 100 years, and this is going to certainly be there for 100 years or more. And all kinds of changes can happen around it on private property, new buildings, new kind of economic development can happen, and the drain should be able to handle all of that development, no matter how it happens, regardless of whether it's a one-story building going in, a new shopping center, or a 10-story office building. The rate of runoff has been calculated and recalculated, and we think that the project that we're going to install is going to meet the needs of the future as well. So with that as a background, I did start this in 1995, looking at this drain, and we got serious about it in 2001 when we realized that we really have to move on fixing it, because it's going to fall apart pretty soon. If we don't fix it now, we're going to have to fix it later, and it's going to be, that's my pitch. I know it's a burden for people to pay extra, but infrastructure isn't cheap, and it's one of the least fun things that I do as an elected official is to have drain projects and have to levy an assessment to have them paid for. But in the end, the people like the end product, and they're going to be better off because of it. I believe that this drain poses a true health hazard in its current condition, and the scope of the project that I have outlined is certainly going to solve all that problem, that health hazard problem. I just would like to also mention that we have obtained several grants. We have over $500,000 worth of money that we're going to spend on the Red Cedar River itself and rebuild it. We've already taken out several of the log jams. The recreational opportunities to the city are going to increase, but the rebuilding of the Red Cedar River from Kalamazoo Street to Harrison Street is going to be quite a phenomenal thing, and that's being paid for by the State Department of Natural Resources grant. We also have some highway grants and some sewer grants that are also added into the mix, in the tune of about $4 million worth of grants toward this project. We are still seeking some other grants as well, and I can't announce them because we haven't got them yet, but we're going to go after as much free money as we can get.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Lindeman. Appreciate your presentation and your time that you put in on this. Are there questions from council members? I don't see any hands up yet, but I suspect there may be. Councilmember Wood, we'll let you get it started.
Thank you. I've got 3 quick questions. One, you had mentioned trails in Rainey Park and that the drain was paying for them. Did you mean part of the assessment is going to be paying for those trails, or the drain commissioner funds are paying for those?
Well, the drain funds, it's a Montgomery drain that's going to pay for it, yes. And
Okay.
they could be used as hiking, biking paths, but they're actually access roads that we have to get our heavy equipment in. There'll be standard width. We can drive a pickup truck down them, or some heavy equipment can go on them, and we have to build them anyway, but we're going to make them so that they're public accessible.
Okay, thank you. Do you believe with the COVID-19 and the stock market and the things that we have there, you're going to see lower numbers as far as interest for borrowing right now?
We believe that the interest rate is going to be very reasonable. There are several factors that would drive the interest rates up. For example, not having full faith and credit of the county, which we're pretty confident that we're going to get. But if we don't get that, for example, it'll force the interest rate up some. I don't know how much, maybe 1% or so. But we can look at pretty favorable interest rates today. If we do this a year from now, I don't have a crystal ball and can't tell you that the interest rates will be far much more, or a lot more, or a lot less, maybe, I don't know. But right now the rates are really good, and this is a good time to borrow the money.
My last question is, when is the projected start date?
We hope to have all of our 13 bids in by the 1st of July is our goal. Now, when I say these dates, obviously, with COVID-19, some of these things may be put back a couple weeks or so, and they may be a couple weeks longer, but our goal right now is to have everything settled by, in terms of our bidding, by the 1st of July or sometime in the month of July, which will mean that we'll be out with our numbers of exactly how much the project cost is and exactly what each municipality is going to have as for a dollar amount sometime by the end of July for sure. But I can't, like I said, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you right now that the bidding process that's going on right now is pretty favorable toward the project. And we have 24 hours a day. We got engineers looking at these plans and trying to figure out how to do something with less money. And surprisingly, or not, maybe not so surprisingly, the contractors that we talk to when we get a contractor on board, they're pretty smart people. They come up with ways of doing the same thing for less money, and we incorporate all that into the project. So I'm hoping it comes in less than 34 million, but you never know.
So July 1st is when you expect to have all the numbers in, but a shovel into the ground, what are we looking at?
We've already started Division 3 or Division, I think it's Division 2 Division 1 and 7, I think we've already started. Along the Sawyer Pontiac property, you'll notice some ditch digging going around, and while the developer had the ground opened up, we put in some storm pipes underneath where their public roads are going to be. So all of that has already taken place. We've already got a shovel in the ground, in other words.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Councilmember Garza.
Thank you, Council President. And thank you, Commissioner Lindeman. I appreciate your presentation you have. And I couldn't agree with you more. Obviously, we need to work up and fix our aging infrastructure. And I may have got confused earlier because I thought you said the developer is going to be the one responsible for paying for the paths or trails. And if so, is the city going to be responsible for taking care of those?
Well, those are two very good questions. The trails south of Michigan Avenue is at the nickel of the developer. They're paying for those. They're going to write a check right to the drainage project to pay for them. All right. The maintenance of the trails over time are going to be the job of the drain office. We're putting in about a 4-inch layer of I think the specs call for a 4-inch layer of bituminous product. They're going to hold up pretty good. There aren't any major truck traffic on it except for our trucks, and so we anticipate the paths to last quite a while, basically. And the maintenance on them will be relatively small or inexpensive. And so when we look at the maintenance of the whole drain project, probably about 95% of it is going to be maintained by the drain themselves, because we're going to have crews in there anyway. We're committed to keeping the paths open in the winter months, for example. We plan on having what's called a mule with a plow on it that can easily plow a path through heavy snow, and we don't anticipate having that be a problem or a very expensive number. But the mule that we're going to buy for it it's a 4-wheel drive little truck that can haul things around and whatever, and make it easier for us to operate our maintenance operation out of it. And we'll have a little shed set up somewhere to have that housed. So we're putting the operator's manual together and how we're going to have to do all that. The only thing that I'm not going to do is pick up trash. Now, we will pick up trash that's along the drain rights of ways and so on and so forth, but trash barrels, I've had this conversation with the park director and the Parks Board. We talked about it too a couple of years ago. I don't haul trash, so if people bring Kentucky Fried Chicken boxes and whatever and throw them in the trash barrel, the city has to pick those up and manage those. I suspect that this drain site, this stormwater facility, is going to draw a lot of attention, and there's going to be a lot of walkers and hikers as part of the river trail, you know. And the project that we're putting in on the Red Cedar River itself, we're putting in over 48, I think the number is around 48, it's 48 or 58, steelhead and salmon breeding beds. They're called REDs. And they're going to go in between Kalamazoo Street and Harrison Road. So there's going to be a very large attraction there for people to wander on down, park their cars, go fishing, and that kind of thing. So all of that pedestrian traffic is going to create trash. I think the cities are going to be on the hook for picking that trash up out of the waste barrels. But other than that, everything else is going to be paid for by the drain itself and maintenance, because almost 100% of both of those parks are going to be used to clean the pollution out of the water. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I do not see other hands. So let's go ahead and move on. Thank you, Mr. Lindeman, for your time. Mr.
Okay,
Loeffler,
thank you
thanks
very
for being
much.
here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to sign off, and I'd like to wish everybody good health, okay?
Thank you, Pat.
Yep.
You as well. Is there further discussion from council among ourselves on this topic? I know there's some decisions we have to make. Right now, it is in the budget as described, with half a special assessment and half a citywide levy under the drain code. As you know, there are options that we can pursue, whether those are paying out of the general fund, which I think Shelby kind of indicated is a pretty tight ask right now, going into the future. And then, you know, moving it to an entire citywide assessment or moving it all to an affected properties assessment. I think those are our options. If anyone wants to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong about that, but I think those are options. So if we want to have any further discussion, we can do that now or next week. But we do have some other things we need to move on to as well if we're not prepared for that. So raise your hand if you wish to deliberate a little bit longer before we move on. Okay, I'm going to call an audible here, folks. I was reminded that the item A under actions needs to get done before City Council because we do have a hearing on it this evening. So I'm going to ask someone, probably Council Member Vice President Hussein, to make the motion to approve the resolution for a noise waiver for E.T. McKenzie Company regarding underground utility improvements on Forest Road, so we can get a discussion going. Council Vice President.
Sure, I would move discussion action item A, which is a resolution for noise waiver, E.T. McKenzie Company, RE underground utility improvements on Forest Road right of way.
Thank you. And we did discuss this, I think, last week a little bit. It is from Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., beginning on May 16th through September 19th to do that work near the McLaren project. Mr. Kilpatrick is on the line if there are other questions. If not, we will move on. Councilmember Garza and Councilmember Wood. Councilmember Garza, you're up first.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Kilpatrick, I sent you an email back, and I appreciate you responding to me as fast as you did, but did you figure out if the gravel trains are still going through the neighborhoods over off Forest Road, and is that going to be part of the noise ordinance? Are they going to be continuing to go into the neighborhoods?
Thanks. Good question. From my understanding, after we talked to both the inspectors who were overseeing it and the contractor, those were minimized. There were times when basically the only route in there was to come in with the gravel trains filled on Forest, but then go out Provincial House. And since they've gotten past that area, I do not believe they're continuing down there, but we did have discussions with them, and they were only going one way through there, and that was basically to avoid having to back all the way down the area. And so I guess if there are further complaints from that area, please feel free to follow up with me, and we'll address it again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wood?
I had asked at our last meeting if we could get some information about the trees, how many of the trees in the Scenic Route that might be affected, and what was the plans for replanting.
Sure.
I
Andy,
will,
there you
yeah,
go.
I can follow up on that. I believe the only trees that I'm aware of that were taken down is the contractor had a little storage yard that was on the north side of the road, and they cut a, I don't know, it was 30 or so feet wide to get into that area. They were storing materials. They were, from my understanding, and I'll have to confirm this with our parks director, but they were kind of scrub trees there. There were no specimen trees, but I can get a list of the number for those, and it would be at the discretion of the Parks Department whether they wanted those replaced if they were part of the cemetery property.
Andy, this has to do with the scenic route. You know, that was designated a scenic route with the trees that were there, and that's what the residents are concerned about. Any taking of those affects, they believe affects that declaration that they have for that. So I think that's what we'd like to get some additional information on. I realize it's not part of the noise waiver, but it is something that I think we'll hear from more residents of as more construction goes on.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, I'm going to let you know Mr. Kaczynski has raised his hand and is willing to at least interject in the conversation. I'm not sure if he'll answer all the questions, but he's got something to say. So, Brett, go ahead. Oh,
yeah,
man.
there were no significant trees cut for the staging area there.
Thank you. Nice beard.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wood, you have more questions, or are you all
Nope,
set?
that was it. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Seeing no other discussion on this item, if you would please indulge us, and if the clerk would please call the roll so we can get this on to council.
Councilmember Betts,
Yes.
Councilmember Dunbar,
Yes.
Councilmember Garza,
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson,
Yes.
Councilmember Spatafor,
Yes.
Councilmember Spitzley,
Yes.
Councilmember Wood,
Yes.
Councilmember Hussein.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the third quarter general fund status report and vacancy report and the FY 2021 proposed budget with amendments. I don't know if those are being taken together or separately, so I'll turn it over to Jake to let us know.
Yep, so I'll go through all of the documents. I can share my screen and put it up if you'd like.
Yes, let me make you a host. Hold on just a second. All right, go for it. Before we move on, I see Councilmember Garza has a question. Councilmember Garza?
I don't know. Thanks, Council President. I don't know if this is the time for it. It's in regards to the proposed budget.
Sure. If we could we hold questions toward the end? And then that way we make sure we get through the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, I'll make sure to cover all the questions I can.
And before we do get started, I do want everyone to know that there is a possibility we could call another committee of the whole meeting before Monday if you feel that it's necessary to continue to answer and ask questions related to the budget. Reach out to me and let me know if you think that's a possibility, and we'll try to get it scheduled as soon as possible yet this week.
All right. Yes, so I provided the third quarter fiscal year 2020 general fund status report. The report itself is fairly self-explanatory. It includes a narrative description of the overall budget, the two first pages, followed by the actual numbers for the remaining 3 pages. You'll notice that over the course of the year, we have amended this report and the structure of it based on input from the council. The same is true of the vacancy report. This should be fairly constant going forward. It's all put together so that unless you have any changes that would help you understand it better, I'll keep on presenting it to you in the same way so that you're not making information based off of inconsistent sources. Overall, as a snapshot, this general fund report reflects a world in which we lived before COVID. So it's up through March 31st of 2020. As a snapshot, we're doing fairly well with positive variances with overall revenues as well as expenditures. The columns you'll see, we have our adopted budget, amended budget, the year-to-date actuals. For revenues, we have the percent year-to-date alongside a 3-year average percent to date. You'll notice that most of these are fairly in line with previous years. Income taxes is slightly ahead, but you'll remember that we reduced our income tax projections mid-year by about 2.4 million. And so while we're ahead of that initial projection, this is as of March 31st, and we expect significant reductions due to the current month and previous month in particular as we look into that. Board of Water and Light, we're expecting to be constant with our budget. State revenues are about in line with previous years. From previous years, we have had an increase in the amount of fire reimbursement grants, which has resulted in it as a one-time revenue receivable that it appears that we've received more state revenues to date than previous years, but that should balance out. We have been hearing from the Michigan Department of Treasury to expect about a 50% reduction in the next two constitutional revenue sharing payments. And so we're watching that very closely. Charges for services are about a little bit behind of where we would expect to be for this year, and we expect that number not really to improve as we continue along. Fines and forfeitures, this ties in very closely with the district court expenditures. Is otherwise where we'd a little bit behind where we'd expect it. And then licenses and permits, we're actually fairly ahead of previous years. And one of the main determinants behind this is our medical marijuana licenses, which have been exceeding our current revenue projection. Overall, we have about 72.2% of our budgeted revenue received, with 70.7% being the 3-year average to date. Expenditures are mostly in line with their respective budgets. We are expecting some vacancy savings as we'll continue on to the previous report. You'll remember that with our amended budget, as we revised our revenue projections and several expenditures, we projected to decrease our fund balance by 3.2 million. And so to date, we have some fairly positive variances in revenues and expenditures. However, that is as of March 31st and does not reflect the world as it exists today. Are there any questions in particular towards the budget report? You'll notice that we're in revenues in particular, there was a 3-year average for the previous years, and expenditures, you have a target expenditure ratio, which accounts for the timing of personnel expenditures and other certain expenditures, such as one-time contracts that are spent at the beginning of the year or very particular timing. So with that, I'll leave it over to council if you have any questions.
Sure, thank you. Councilmember Garza, is your question related to this or the 2021 budget? Feel free to ask.
It's more in regards to a contract and the furloughs going on.
Okay, well, we will. I know the mayor's going to address that specifically, so I'll move on to Councilmember Wood, and then we'll come back to you after the full budget. Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, President Spatafor. Jake, when we are showing here the amended budget, is that with the amendments that council made with the resolution that it passed, making changes to the projections of income that we were going to receive to finish out this fiscal year?
Are you talking about the mid-year budget amendment, the
Yes,
February?
I am.
That is correct.
Okay, so this reflects those changes.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
very welcome.
All right, I do not see other questions on this item, so Jake, if we could move on to the great news presented in fiscal year 21 budget.
Excellent. So, sorry for the delay. I'm still learning to navigate Zoom. So the first couple of pages, as you'll see, reflect pages directly out of our budget book. And it looks fairly similar, in fact, to the quarterly report you just looked at. And so for the first 2 pages, you have 3 columns of note. Our 2020 amended budget, the fiscal year 21 budget we proposed back in March, and then the current proposal for our budget, incorporating some savings that we've provided to you. As you notice, property taxes remain unchanged from our initial estimate. Income taxes have been adjusted to reflect new estimates from the city treasurer. Return on equity remains the same. With property taxes, these are as far as what you could call our fixed revenues, projecting for the current fiscal year. State revenues, we're projecting an approximately 15% reduction in about 2 months of worth of revenue sharing over the course of the fiscal year. Charges for services, I know, was a object of interest and attention at the previous meeting. I've gone through with many of the departments, speaking individually, to see how the emergency would impact their budgets. There's a very, very slight reduction in public safety. Reimbursements comes largely from other funds and will remain constant. Code compliance revenues have been adjusted. Recreation fees in particularly have been heavily adjusted. I've gotten these estimates directly from the Parks Department. Appeals and petitions, roughly the same. Work for others, a slight reduction, and the others about the same. Fines and forfeitures connects with the district court budget. We have a slight reduction there. Licenses and permits, we have some slight reductions. It's fairly, no major changes to note. We still reflect medical marijuana revenues remaining constant. Interest income, a slight reduction based on reduced income interest expectations. Other revenues, roughly the same. A slight reduction in donations and contributions expected. And overall, total general fund, we're expecting about 12.5 million in reductions to revenue. At the general fund appropriations, we have the same general fund expenditure page from the budget book, amended budget, proposed in March, the May proposal. These take into consideration the detailed expenditure reductions we have provided for you. I'll pull up that document in a second to go over it there. Overall, an item that will be of your great attention and interest as our amended budget projected to decrease our budget by, or our fund balance by 3.2 million. Our initial proposed budget, following the budget policies provided for the fiscal year 2020, we produced a no changes balanced budget, no impact of COVID that contributed 500 to our fund balance. Even with the very significant reductions we are proposing with expenditures, we still expect a 4.8 million reduction in our fund balance, which we will have to be very careful, particularly towards planning into future fiscal years beyond 2021. For the last 2 pages, we presented the same information along with some of our proposed reductions and changes. So right here you have our March proposal. The second column includes healthcare and property causality changes, which will be savings that will be entirely administrative and distributed across all departments, having no operational change. And then the third column, we have the individual changes, which are listed in our proposed savings document we provided. And then the fourth column will be our revised proposed budget. And this takes the format of the budget resolution as it exists in the budget book and will be before you next week. And so I'll pull up the potential savings document. Actually, I'll pull up the, before we go into savings, I'll continue on our discussion of revenues. Show you the city treasurer's projections about the COVID-19 impact on income tax. And so the projection that we are currently using reflects the 20% impact projection. This scenario assumes that the executive order does not extend beyond June 1st. There are several other assumptions of note. Our initial budget projection for income tax was 39.2 million. As you can see, even the most moderate mild impact projected is fairly severe to our budget. That would be a 7.8 million reduction. The moderate impact would be even more severe to our budget. And then the severe, we'd have to come back with you for even more changes than we have provided. So I can go into that if you want more detail on that projection, or I believe Judy might be available too. But let me pull up the proposed savings. So in being attentive to the requirements of fiscal responsibility, we've provided a itemized list of various reductions along with what we believe are the annual versus one-time savings, the community impact that these changes would have, our authority, and an approximate estimate of the time it would take to implement these changes. So on the second page, we have the itemized list altogether. So general fund revenue, about 12.5 million reduction. Expenditures, we have come up with approximately 7.1 million so far to propose to you tonight. So one of the first options we provided is updating our 1.25% basic human needs estimate to reflect our current revenue and new items within the budget. That provides us a one-time financial impact of about 243 million or 1,000. We have received additional CDBG funds that will be going towards administrative use, about 134,000. One of the areas that we can find additional savings is by reducing our LEPFA subsidy. We could provide 200,000 through that source. This requires coordination with LEPFA, take a little bit of communication and consideration. The fourth option impacts the Economic Development Corporation. This would be to fund the 2021 LEAP contract from EDC reserves, rolling over existing facade program funding from the previous year rather than contributing 162,000 as we did in our proposed budget. overall, the amount that we budgeted in our initial estimate was 462,000 for these two uses. And so that's just an area to consider. Within the city-supported agencies, we can find savings either one-time or continuing from Sister City, Common Ground, which won't be happening this year, My Lansing, Rail Council. We're proposing a reduction of arts and culture grants by 75,000, moving the Community Corrections Advisory Board and Safety Council to Human Services. And that will be a 214,000 savings in our budget. Another area, one of our larger one-time savings would be to use the Red Cedar proceeds for current year CIP projects. That would be a savings of 2.2 million, but again, will be a one-time stopgap and not help us for future fiscal years. A smaller savings, we could use prior year savings and capital projects expenditures to fund current year projects. On some comparatively smaller items, there's the Let Us Live Well program we can eliminate. Morris Park Pool will not be operating for the next fiscal year, and so we can eliminate that from our budget, at least as a one-time expenditure. The same for the 4th of July event. 25,000 includes 20,000 in fireworks costs and 5,000 in other community event costs. Looking at our training budgets, we expect that our departments will be having reduced training, and we're going to be also reducing travel. We're putting a near stop to it, and very easily, without touching on emergency services training or necessary events, we can pull together about $80,000 in savings across departments. And freezing non-essential hiring and vacancy reductions across departments, we project another 700,000 in savings. To the bigger ongoing financial savings that we're projecting, there are some administrative changes in how we administer healthcare that we can implement without impacting our operations. That would be a 1.9 million in reoccurring savings. We've already implemented some property and casualty changes, and that will be 400,000 in savings. The impact for all of these, you can see the accounts referenced in this column, which would point towards the line item budget that we've provided with you previously in order to show where that would impact the budget. Altogether, we've come up with about 2.4 million in annual savings and 4.7 million in one-time savings for a total impact of 7.1 million in expenditure reductions.
Thank you.
Summary. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
Yep. And so talking about training and travel reductions, I've itemized which departments and how much they would be impacted. Very few budgets have their, or I don't believe any of these budgets are an entire elimination of their training and travel expenditure, but a reduction based on where we expect they'd be. And then the other savings that we've discussed on the previous page are shown here. We've had some adjustments to the council budget through discussion, and also with our fire budget, we've discussed that are slightly different from the allocated changes above. Are there any questions now that you'd like to?
I'll just cut cut in real quick. We're going to go to the mayor. He had something he wanted to add, but I wanted to add to council folks. The council budget changes were the ones we actually approved. They were just different than what was in the budget that came to us a few weeks ago. So nothing changed from what you all approved as far as I'm aware. Is that correct, Jake?
Yeah, sorry, your volume was quiet and that might have been a me problem, but let me increase my volume. Could you ask that again?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. You said there's some changes to the council budget, and I saw some eyes kind of look over like what changes are they, and I think they were just changes that we had put through that didn't get reflected in the presented budget. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is to line it up with what you initially submitted to me.
Okay, with the exception of the training and travel reduction that you're proposing
is
for all
correct.
of the departments. Okay, very good.
And the
So-
allocated changes with the administrative savings.
Correct. Thank you very much. Mayor Shore, are you still on the line? I know there was something you wanted to address.
Well, I am still here. I think, well, Councilwoman Garza started to ask it, so I wanted to address that as well. And it just came out this afternoon because we just received, signed with 2 of our unions. So we are planning to utilize what we're calling voluntary furloughs for employees. We are seeing that there are several employees that have childcare issues or are immunosuppressed healthcare issues or other things and are not able to work. We have many employees that are working on our front lines. We have many employees that are working in office, and we have many employees that are working remotely. But at this point, we're expecting everybody to work that are staying on. The state is offering increased benefits through the federal government dollars that have been given. So we have negotiated with the UAW and with Teamsters 214 to create what we're calling a voluntary furlough, where employees can request to be furloughed until July 31st, I believe. Yeah, till July 31st, which aligns with the federal benefits. The city will continue to pay for their health care, so they don't have to worry about that. And then they'll be able to apply with UIA, which my understanding is a lot easier now than it was when it first started. We're also working with Teamsters 243 to see if we can come to the same agreement, and we're going to offer the same thing for non-bargaining and mayoral staff. So we do expect there will be some budget savings from that, although we don't know what, so it's not factored in because we don't know how many are going to request, and we need to see who requests. It'll be a request, and then the department directors will weigh in with their thoughts. We don't want to drastically affect services. We might affect services some. There could be some services that are slower or some services that are affected, but we don't know what the requests look like yet. If everybody in solid waste asked for it, we probably wouldn't approve everybody because we still have to pick up the trash. We are not planning to contract out services as a result, because the idea is to assist employees and to have budget savings, and that is in the MOUs that were signed with each of the unions. So I know the question has been asked before about service impact. We're not sure what that's going to be until we see, and we do plan to minimize service impact because I want to make sure that we help the citizens, that we help our budget, and we do what we can to assist the employees as well. So that was, I would say, was announced today. The employees signed on, and we sent it out to employees this afternoon to let them know. So you're finding out. We haven't put out a press release or anything on this yet because we want to make sure employees know about it before we're broadcasting this through the media. But I'm letting you know because I think something went out about 3:30 today because we were able to finalize the MOUs, and we're hoping to have something by the end of the week, knowing how many apply, how many we can agree to, and we hope to have something by the end of the week. It's going to be very it's going to be a lot of time for our staff, but we're going to see what we can get done. And then again, we hope to include Teamsters 243 to that as well, but that is still in discussion. So, and I'm happy to address that. I'm happy to address any of the recommendations that Jake has put forward. We had a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation, and We're trying not to affect the services, and we're trying not to affect our employees as much as we can. And we're doing the best we can, along with just about every other city in Michigan. I will add, we have aggressively been pushing for federal dollars. As we all know here, cities and counties of 500,000 or more and states all receive money in the last federal appropriation. The state has yet to give us any of the dollars that came to the state, and I know the Municipal League has requested, and we are working very closely with Congresswoman Slotkin, with Senators Peters and Stabenow, with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the NLC to try and push. And if we get dollars from the feds, we will certainly use it, for COVID expenses as well as whatever budgetary expenses. We clearly have plenty that we can show that are as a result of COVID-19, because we've got a budget that is much more in the hole now than it was before the COVID problem started. So, as that works its way out, we will add that to the mix, and I very much hope to come back to you with a supplemental appropriation for that. But until there's something that passes, nothing is set. So that's what I've got. Again, I'm happy to address questions along with Shelby, Jake, and I think we have a few directors on the phone if you have specific questions in departments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up is Councilmember Garza, followed by Councilmember Wood, Spitzley, and Hussein. We'll start with Councilmember Garza.
Thank you, Council President. And can everybody hear me good? Because my internet connection seems not to be the greatest.
Yes, Jeremy, we can hear you.
Thank you. So, Mayor Shore, thanks for being here. And I think I kind of what you said, but it was going in and out. So I'm just going to answer my question, and hopefully we're not going over it twice. So as we move through the voluntary furlough program and anticipated layoffs, how are we going to ensure that the layoffs are proportional? For instance, like with several superintendents and O&M and the fire chief, what would we need all the extra command for with all the rank and files being laid off?
Well, oh, sorry, I lost my video here. I'm also having internet problems. Our department directors are on top of all of that in terms of service delivery. Right now it's voluntary, and we're hopeful that voluntary will be enough, but everything's on the table. If we have to go from voluntary furlough to involuntary furlough or layoff, clearly that's not my preference. But we will manage service delivery. Each department director is going to work through that. You have to match the superintendents and the command with the line workers and the firefighters and police officers. But I trust Chief Green, Chief Mackey, Director Kilpatrick. Those are kind of the three big departments. But I trust all of our directors to make sure that they are navigating service delivery. And it's something that we discussed with the unions. The UAW especially was very interested in making sure that that service delivery remains. We don't want to take someone from O&M and put them in parks if that's not what they're qualified for. You need to make sure that that employees are qualified to do the work, and that that we can sustain services. Again, could be delays. I'm not sure what the service impacts are going to be, but we will certainly work through the personnel of the service, which is, I think, what you're asking. And then I'm happy to chat with you, one-on-one if the internet's cutting out and you're not getting that answer.
No, I think I understood you clearly. I'm hoping that the different department heads are taking that into consideration as well, and all departments are seeing a proportional amount of furloughs and layoffs. And I guess thank you so much. My next question is off topic, so if anybody has any more questions, I'll let you guys go ahead and take it.
It's off topic from the budget, Jeremy?
No, it's just off topic about the furloughs.
Oh, go ahead. If it's a budget question, go for it.
Thank you. I'm just curious, has a contract been finalized yet with the LFD, or at least are we nearing the final stages of a contract?
We are very close. Things keep changing. There have been things changing for a while. I can't say too much publicly because it's in negotiations, but things have changed. And now things have changed a little bit more, but I think we're very close. We talked about it again today. Firefighters certainly understand the new reality of the situation we're in, and we are working with them to try and close the contract. So I think we're close, but again, it's been kind of an evolving process over the last 2 months, and now we have a very different evolution with the situation we're in. But we're working on it daily.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Councilmember Wood, Spitzley, and Hussein. Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, President Spatafor. First of all, on the question of the EDC reserves that we have, how much do we have in those reserves, Jake? How much does the EDC have? Excuse me.
For the facade funding, we have about 50,000 balance. The EDC reserves is significantly more. I think it's enough that they can withstand this one-time reduction in our subsidy, but it's not a funding source that we could repeat more than a few times before that would run out. And being a partner with the EDC, we wouldn't want to do it more than a couple times at the most. Does that answer your question?
Carol, you're muted. Hold on. There you go.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Thank you. That does answer part of my question. My other concern has to do with the fact that at one time, we have to use general fund dollars to pay the bond debt service proceeds dealing with the parking ramps and that. And so part of the reason that we had created and there was money started to be put in the EDC reserve fund so that we didn't have to utilize that again. Knowing that our parking system has been down for a while, we had also just approved bonds for that. Can someone give me an idea where we are with that? Have we purchased those bonds yet? Are we going to continue to move forward and do that work? What is the projections of revenue coming in from the parking system? And again, just like anything else, this is going to take a gradual uptick of bringing businesses back and employees back to the state and things like that might not utilize all the spaces that we currently have.
I can answer. There sounded like a few questions in there, so I'll try to answer them as I heard them. So after council approved the resolutions for the new money as well as the refunding deals back in our last meeting in March, specifically for the new money, there's a 45-day referendum period, or really a hold period before we can issue the bonds. And so that period's coming up. I think it's the 15th, and I know Brian's on the phone. He can correct me if I'm wrong. The application is going into the Department of Treasury for approval so that we can issue those. The idea was to package those all together so we can get a better rate. But certainly we've been watching the markets to make sure that we're not going to issue more debt or refund debt that if the interest rates don't hold true. So similar to kind of Pat's comments about the bonds that he's looking to issue, we're also watching to make sure. We have had a couple folks, interested in our credit and our outlook of how things are trending for the city. Certainly that's something that we're focused on. We want to make sure that we get the best rates. At this point, I think if all of a sudden rates just skyrocketed and we couldn't get them, likely we would hold until they came back down. So Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's true, Shelby, is that first, by state law, the city or any municipality that issues debt has to have present value savings or positive savings. So we continue to monitor it. Interest rates continue to trend down. So, and there's market acceptance for tax exempt paper. So we are going to be in the position to essentially continue to move forward the refunding transactions, and then also the new money for the for the parking structure and for the tax anticipation note if needed.
Thank you. My next question has to do with the 200,000 that would be going to the entertainment facilities. What talks have we had with Scott Key on that, and how will that impact what they're doing over there?
So I've been talking with Scott specifically about this particular reduction. If you remember in our last amendment that we did in February, that reduction also held true for FY20 or this current fiscal year. So all we're doing is maintaining that reduction for FY21. So I've talked to Scott. Actually, we spoke on Saturday to make sure he was aware that it was going to be included with this reduction. Certainly, just like us, they're looking to see, how soon are they going to be back in action. It's potential that the city could actually reduce that further if necessary. If they have no activity or any need for the dollars, then certainly we can get those back. But at this point, I feel comfortable with the kind of the reduction moving forward is that it was the same for this current fiscal year. And until we kind of have a better sense on when they can actually, have a conference again, I know they're struggling too to try to figure out the true impacts of this. So right now, I guess to answer your question, Scott's aware. We've been talking about it for several months. And our conversations originally started at the first of the year with this current reduction for this current fiscal year.
Okay. You had mentioned, Mr. President, that some of the department heads are on. Is Judy on from the Treasury so that she could go over her projected numbers?
She is on, it looks like. Councilmember Wood, can I move on to questions, then we'll come back to Judy real quick? I got a few other folks who want to ask some questions. So if you're done with your questions, we'll move on. But Ms. Kaler, we can have you come on after our round of questions are done, so I get everyone to get a chance.
I do have a couple of others, but if they're not asked, then I would like to be able to come back and get to those. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have two questions. And one, I think, is a budget question, but we've got a number of, construction projects coming up, Mr. Mayor, the Moores River Trail and some of those are, because of COVID and budget constraints, are we still going to be able to do those projects?
Well, construction is allowed now, and this is actually a good thing because the more people we have working, the more tax revenues we're going to receive. I guess it's a Brett question. We're getting money from other sources. We're getting money from the county. We're getting money from the Natural Resources Trust Fund.
Mm-hmm.
We have previously approved dollars for our matches. I believe so. I guess the question will be, is the capacity there? And I believe it is, but Brett, if you're still on the line, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Construction projects on the trail are continuing.
Great, thank you.
Good question. Great question.
The other question I have is on your savings matrix. Nicely done, first of all. So are these options, or are you guys proposing these? What's the status of this matrix here, Jake?
Yes, so we have, I'll try and throw that up a moment. And so all these savings have been integrated with the proposed budget that we have provided. That is the budget. As I demonstrate here, we reduce our revenue projections by 12.5 million and expenditures by 7.1 million overall.
Yeah.
As we look into what that impact has on our overall budget, I'll throw that on our screen shortly.
And while you're doing that, the question I have is, which I think it's been answered, is that doesn't impact our fund balance. I mean, our fund balance is still going to be dangerously low, or does that, impact our fund balance and raise it up? How does it impact our fund balance?
Yeah, so the budget proposal that we've provided for you includes all of those savings. So if you choose to not follow any of those options, it will have a negative impact on our fund balance. Or if you choose to adjust our revenue estimates, if you don't believe that, say, income taxes are going to be falling as much as a 20%, or you believe that there's other changes that should be made, that could be a potentially positive impact on our budget. But it is, as we currently estimate, considering the 12.5 million in reductions these expenditure reductions will keep us at a positive fund balance of 1.9 million.
With the $7 million reduction, right? I'm sorry, Jake. I don't understand. I don't do numbers. Help me out here. So
Yeah,
with the
I am here
$7
to-
million, it'll
Just to clarify, Jake took that matrix, dropped it into these assumptions. And so even with cutting all of those things, we only end with 1.9 in fund balance. That's with all of the cuts.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
That's a simple explanation. Sorry, I'm a numbers guy, and so
You're killing me. You're killing me.
I've been
All
looking
right.
at this for 6 months. It's
Thank
burned
you.
into my brain.
All right, thanks. That's what I wanted to know. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councilmember Spitzley. Councilmember Hussein.
Sure. First, I want to thank Councilman Garza for asking the question about the firefighters contract. I think, more than maybe any other time in recent history, their importance is being underscored. So they're showing up, they're risking exposure, they're serving as our first line of, emergency response. And I certainly want to make sure that their families and themselves, that they, have some sense of safety and security as we move forward. That being said, I'm looking at a few things here. The $20,000 that we are looking to save by not opening up the parks, the Morris Park pool. For my time as a park board member, I believe we typically open up our pools early June. I think we close them early September. Was there any discussion within the administration to also look to not open the Hunter Park pool? And the reason I ask the question is, although we, are re-engaging the economy, and although we're seeing some lifting of stay home, stay safe, restrictions, I highly doubt it's going to be advisable to open up, pools and to have people congregating at those pools throughout the summer months. So have we looked at that? And if we were to not open up that pool, what would be the savings?
Yes, we are looking at all of that. Parks is going to look very different this summer than it has in the past. We can't have people congregating. We're working on camps. We're going to cancel the 4th of July parade. Hunter Park is very likely to be closed. Is it the whole summer? Is it just the beginning? I don't think we know the answer to that yet, so we haven't put those savings in. But we very much anticipate having a budget amendment quarterly, and that will most certainly be part of the calculation. I mean, Brett, I don't know if you want to weigh in here, but I think, Councilman, you're 100% right. Congregating in the next few months is regardless of what happens in terms of businesses reopening. Are we going to have a lot of people in one place? Probably not. Again, we and everyone else are navigating camps. We're all navigating, and I want camps to happen because I want people to be able to return to work and have somewhere for their kids to go. But you also don't want to have people, kids congregating when they shouldn't be. So that's all a challenge. But I don't know that we know the savings yet, because I don't know that we know for sure what is going to be closed yet. But if I had to guess, I would say in the future you will see that. Brett, do you want to weigh in quickly on any of this?
Sure. So with the stay-at-home, know that the next phase is going to be, a lot of the social distancing. We do not feel that we can achieve social distancing at the pools in the summer. We also do not feel that you can hire lifeguards on just, say, in the middle of July. And so I do not see Hunter Park, it will not open this year.
Just very quickly, Brett, could you tell us? So could you tell us what the cost savings would be? Would it be similar to the $20,000 savings we see from not opening up Morris Park?
Yeah, we're going to have a situation there where we have about, I believe, $20,000 in that. Plus, we can add a security. We usually have pool security there. So right now, I think we can add that in, and I can get with Jake on exactly what that number will be. But yes, it's much different at the pools than it is. We're really taking a look at our summer camps to see if we can offer those, but it's a matter of keeping people safe as well, and kind of balancing that with the daycare needs.
So I think
continue, President Spaniel.
Councilman, I think the answer is we can either have that information for you for next Monday, or we can have it for the next budget amendment, whatever your preference is.
My preference is that we would include it. I'm sorry. My preference would be that we would include it in the the resolution in terms of passing the budget. That being said, Mayor Short, can you speak very briefly? I know that we had Chief Green engage in the last meeting, and he talked about 12-hour shifts and where they were at in discussions with our unions. Have we agreed to that? If we have, how many cycles? What are the cost savings if we have? Where are we at with that?
You know what? I don't know that we calculated that as part of the budget, so I don't have that information. He's been working on that with his staff. I know he was going to implement something, which I believe he can under emergency conditions, but in terms of moving forward, I don't know that he has finalized that. I can get you that information and send it to you, but I don't think that is included in our budget projections, so I'm not prepared to answer that right now, but we can get that information and get it to you.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Hussein. Ms. Kaler, are you still on the line? We only have about 5 minutes, and I don't want to rush you. And there is another committee of the whole meeting if we need to go a little farther, scheduled for Monday evening, if you are available to be at that as well. But if you want to go ahead and go over a quick high level over your projections, we'd very much appreciate it, and we appreciate you putting that together.
Certainly. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thanks. So the matrix that Jake had pushed up earlier, Jake, are you able to put that up by any chance? If not, I'll just keep moving on. So there's 4 different scenarios regarding income tax revenue. The first is the pre-COVID, which we did nothing to, obviously. The second is the 20%. The third is 25% and 35%. So the scenarios are based on a phased-in approach that it was interesting. Carol raised this at the last meeting, where it's safe to assume that not every restaurant, not every bar, not every salon, not every office, including City Hall, is not going to go back to normal, meaning we're not going to have 100% of all of our employees there at the same time. From the office perspective, we understand how that would affect services, but from a revenue perspective, we have to understand that we're not going to necessarily obtain 100% of the revenues because the workforce is not back 100%. You know, the income tax revenues are based on personal income and business profit or business income. So we have all the different unemployment scenarios, and more people are filing for unemployment. I wanted to share a couple of things because I have worked with the Brookings Institute and then also LEAP, EDC, and a few other economic institutions because I wanted to find out what other people's perspectives were. And I also have talked to a lot of my peers that are Michigan income tax administrators. And for the most part, there are 22 cities that levy taxes in Michigan. And the majority of them are predicting that they will have a 30% decrease in revenues. I'm not completely comfortable moving to that extreme because we have some things working for us, but we definitely need to be aware of the fact that in March, for instance, there was a job loss in 8 of the 11 industry categories, and 50% of those jobs were in the hospitality and restaurant category. So what does that mean to Lansing? In the hotel, restaurant, bars category, we have 524 businesses in Lansing, and that's 8,104 employees. That industry in Lansing alone garners $418,870,000 in revenues. Now that's not for us specifically, but that's what's generated in our economy just from hotels, restaurants, and bars. And so if we look at other industries, landscaping, there's 6 companies. That's a $12.2 million industry in Lansing. Beauty, barbers, shops, salons, there are 192 that are recorded or licensed in Lansing. That's 812 employees. That's a $25.5 million industry. So just those 3 industry are categories that I talked to you about. A lot of them had employees that were furloughed, laid off, and some of these businesses, quite frankly, have closed. Now, I'm not trying to be a doom and gloom person. I'm just trying to give you kind of the background information that we were exposed to in order to come up with some of the projections that you see before you. So in the Lansing, East Lansing area, the unemployment rate, Carol had asked this earlier too, because, you know, when you're talking about income tax, you know about the employment rate and things of that nature. In February of 2020, the unemployment rate was 4.3%. But then when we went into March of 2020, it was, I'm sorry, no, let me back up. February of 2020, the unemployment rate was 4%. In March of 2020, it was 4.3%. So it rose 0.3%. And that was affected by COVID. Now, we don't have the April numbers yet, but we all are comfortable probably in assuming that more of the full impact will be realized in April. So we'll see additional data that will help us that will show that we really, a 20% scenario is probably a more reasonable assumption rate for a decline in revenues. And one more thing I did, when in talking through this, I also wanted to put this a little bit more in perspective as well. So remember the last meeting that we were all at, and we talked about fiscal year 20 revenues and why there was a decline. We talked about, you know, the state tape wasn't implemented, but then we also talked about the effects of the East Lansing income tax, as well as the 40-day GM strike. The GM strike, that was a 40-day strike, and that was one sector. Now, granted, there were ancillary effects in our economy as far as money being spent, not generated, not, you know, the consumption rate went, you know, down because of people not spending money, right? That cost us about $1 million, and that's one industry. So let's talk about the fact that we had all these other industries like landscaping, medical facilities, all these other industries were shut down, so to speak. So I think that the 7.845 is a very reasonable assumption to base our budget on. Now, I'm optimistic. I'm believing that, you know, prosperity is going to sweep all throughout Lansing, that we're going to beat this, and some innovation is going to help us to overcome a lot of this. But for now, looking at the facts that we are faced with, that is what we have come up with, is the 20%. Is there anything else that?
Oh, we do have some questions, but I will remind folks, and unfortunately we're over time and there's no way to let people on the other Zoom know that we are still in this meeting. So we'll go and ask the questions now, but we'll try to keep them terse. And if we have to come back, we will certainly make time on Monday at the next committee of the whole meeting. So Councilmember Wood.
I have a series of questions that are going to take longer than a couple of minutes.
Okay.
And there are some other questions that were in the projected budget that I haven't had a chance to ask. I am highly recommending that we have another committee of a whole. I don't see how we can go through this information and then have it just at a committee of a whole on the 18th and then vote on it. At least I wouldn't be comfortable making that decision at that time. So I would encourage you to look at scheduling another committee of a whole for this week sometime. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Wood. And Councilmember Betts, I see you have your hand up as well. If we could get those questions that you might still have, send them over in advance to folks. Perfect. We can make sure the presentations include the answers to some of those. I understand if they're organic and occur during the presentation, but if you could shoot them over, that would be greatly appreciated so we can get the answers in the next presentation. I will reach out to folks and see when it makes sense to have another committee of the whole meeting that does not require a notice, et cetera, beyond the Open Meetings Act. So we'll do that. You guys are killing me, but we, in the interest of transparency and full vetting of the process, we'll make sure to do that. I just want to go over the process real quick too. Besides that additional committee of the whole, we will have one more committee of the whole meeting Monday evening to move the budget out of the committee to the full council. At that point, we will entertain amendments to both the budget itself as well as our budget priorities. And you do have an email from Sherry about the budget priorities, so make sure you take a look at that before Monday, please. and then the budget as well. If there are any changes that we want to make, please get them, earlier to the council so we will not deliberate with them, but if you could get them to us so they're in front of us, that would be ideal. Do not make them on the floor. If you can avoid that, although it is your right to do so, please try to avoid that eventuality. I'm going to bump us over to City Council. We will start at 10 after to allow folks time for biological breaks and the like. Could we? Never mind. I don't want to do a roll call. At the end with all that, we are adjourned at 7:05.